Hey guys, Levi here and welcome to a new episode of the Albion Online Weapon Overview series. Today we will go over the Dagger weapon tree, which is a tree known for its high mobility and burst skills. Personally, I think the daggers are very fun to play, mainly because of their swift gameplay. Among them are very mechanically challenging ones, such as the Deathgivers, opportunity seekers, such as the Bloodletter, and those with a lot of single target damage, such as the Dagger pair. If you like a melee playstyle in which you need to get up close to your enemies and make it personal, this just might be the weapon tree for you. Although the daggers are more popular in PvP content, you can definitely use them for PvE as well. With a wide variety of abilities covering buffs, mobility, single target damage, AoE damage, debuffs, crowd control and even healing, you can play the daggers in many different ways and use them for a lot of different purposes. I do think any beginner can pick up the dagger tree if they are interested in it, but I also think there is a real learning curve to the various dagger weapons. So if you decide to play the daggers, you better be up for the challenge. Once you master this tree, however, your presence in PvP will be like no other. At all times you play the dagger as a DPS in the different contents the game has to offer, and you will quickly learn that striking at the right moment will be a critical factor to your success throughout your gameplay. The daggers have access to 3 Q abilities, and these are mostly centered around damage, buffs, debuffs and mobility. Let's see what the Q abilities are and what they're good for. The first one is Sunder Armor, which is a single target ability that deals damage to your target and decreases their resistances, an effect that stacks up to 3 times. This ability is great to use against bosses in PvE and a viable pick in small-scale PvP. Since the debuff is applied on your target, they will have to cleanse it if they wish to get rid of it. And in small-scale PvP, players typically don't use cleanse, rendering this ability a strong debuff that gives you quite the advantage. The second ability is Deadly Swipe, which is your Q ability with mobility on it. Having mobility on one of the Q abilities is a very rare thing among the different weapon trees, which makes this ability your go-to in all sorts of content, be it PvE or PvP. As you leap toward the targeted location, you deal damage to all enemies hit with the Deadly Swipe. You also gain 1 Assassin Spirit charge for each enemy hit, which is a buff that increases your damage. This buff can be stacked up to 3 times, so if you hit 3 enemies with a single Deadly Swipe, you reach the maximum damage buff straight away. As for the third ability, you have the Assassin Spirit, which gives you the Assassin Spirit charges over time without you having to hit anyone, unlike the Deadly Swipe. This ability has limited use, but in those few cases it pretty much is a necessity. You strictly want to use this ability in PvP scenarios where your goal is to buff yourself before you go in to deal even more damage with your other abilities. As for the W abilities, the daggers have access to 5 different ones. These are centered around damage, buffs, debuffs, mobility and even crowd control. The first ability is Throwing Blades, which will be your go-to in PvE content until you unlock Chain Slash. Throwing Blades is an AoE damage ability that buffs your damage and movement speed based on the amount of unique targets you hit with it, with the cap being at 3 stacks. This ability is sometimes used in PvP as well, where it's mainly about the damage buff you get from this ability, so that you can do even more damage with your other abilities. The second ability is Dash, which is a mobility skill that also provides you a damage buff upon using it. In general, you do not use this ability for PvE or PvP. It's pretty much for escape purposes only. The third ability is Forbidden Stab, which is a single target ability that does damage and reduces both healing received and healing cost. This makes it a very strong ability against healers, as they won't be able to heal themselves for nearly as much whilst they are debuffed. Although the use of this ability is very limited, it is a very strong ability for small-scale PvP if there is a need for a healing debuff. You typically don't use this ability in PvE. The fourth ability is Shadow Edge, which is the only W ability with crowd control. When using the Shadow Edge, you throw a knife in the selected direction, and if you hit a target with it, the target will be stunned, and you will pull yourself behind the enemy that you hit. The Shadow Edge is strictly for PvP and only when you are in need of a gap closer with CC. And finally, Chain Slash, which is the 5th ability and your go-to for both PvE and PvP content. The Chain Slash is an AoE damage ability that turns you invisible and grants you immunity to damage during its use. Since you can use the Chain Slash from a range, this also makes for a bit of mobility. A very powerful ability that you definitely want to use for PvE, but also in most PvP scenarios. The daggers have access to 4 different passives. The first one is Deep Cuts, which inflicts a bleed every 4 auto attacks you do. This makes for some extra single target damage that can be good to have in both PvE and PvP. The second one is Life Leech, which is a self-healing passive that heals you for a portion of your auto attack damage. This is a great passive to use in case you need some sustain, such as with difficult bosses during PvE. The third passive is Attack Speed, which increases your attack speed for a short duration after every 5th auto attack. Whenever you play one of the daggers which playstyle revolves around auto attacks, such as the one-handed dagger, this passive can come in handy to increase the effectiveness. And the fourth one is Aggressive Rush, which grants you a damage buff every 4 auto attacks. A viable pick for both PvE and PvP if you can utilize this buff with other abilities. Now that we have all the abilities covered, let's go over the unique abilities that belong to each one of the 7 daggers and see what type of playstyle they make for and what kind of content they are popular in. The Bloodleather is probably the most played dagger among the 7 daggers. It might even be the most popular weapon in the game. It is a one-handed dagger, meaning you can wield an offhand with it. This makes for a wide variety of gameplay options with the Bloodleather, in which you can completely alter your playstyle based on the build you take with it. The special ability of the Bloodleather is Lunging Stabs, which is a dash that deals damage to all enemies you pass through based on their current health. If they have above 40% health, you will deal a decent amount of damage, whereas any targets below 40% will take a big chunk of damage, which sometimes is enough to delete your enemies. If you hit at least one enemy below 40% with the Lunging Stabs, you also get a big cooldown buff to all your abilities. This makes the Bloodleather an excellent choice if you wish to play as an opportunity seeker, in which you execute targets that are on low health. Even if you don't manage to finish them with the Lunging Stabs, you can chain it into your Chain Slash and Deadly Swipe to get the job done. The Bloodleather is used for all sorts of PvP content, from small scale all the way to large scale. And since it is one of the few daggers with an AoE on the special ability, this also makes it one of the better picks for PvE content. Check the description below if you wish to learn more about the Bloodleather. I have a guide dedicated to this weapon in which I explain why the Bloodleather is the most versatile weapon in the game and also provide you with some builds to start off with. The Bridled Fury is the newest addition to the dagger weapon tree and is the second dagger to have an AoE on the special ability. The special ability of the Bridled Fury is Merciless Finish, which swings your daggers in a cone in front of you, dealing damage to any targets hit based on the Assassin Spirit charges you have on yourself or the Thunder Armor charges you have on your enemies. The moment you use this ability, you also leap backwards from your location, pretty much disengaging from the fight as you dish out the damage. This makes this weapon a very good pick for all sorts of PvP content, but mostly for medium and large scale fights. In the bigger fights, the Bridled Fury is all about your special ability, in which you want to build around buffing your damage and getting that big clap in. But since the Bridled Fury is only one of the 2 daggers with an AoE on it, it's also one of the more viable options for various PvE content. Having AoE damage on your E just helps a lot with clearing mob packs, and within the dagger tree you're either looking at the Bloodleather or the Bridled Fury for that. The dagger is a one-handed weapon and players tend to call it the one-handed dagger. The special ability of the one-handed dagger is Bloodthirsty Blade, and when you activate it, you deal additional damage with each auto attack. The additional damage you do is then converted to health through lifesteal, making this weapon a high sustain one due to the self-sustain feature. This is the only dagger with the healing perk to it, and because of this perk, this weapon makes even the most difficult bosses that much easier. You also get a movement speed buff whilst this ability is active, but you do lose a part of your health every second as a trade-off for all of this. Therefore, it's very important you disable this ability when you're not using it any longer. All in all, the special ability makes for a playstyle that mainly revolves around your auto attacks and makes for a lot of single target DPS. The one-handed dagger is great for PvE content that falls on the more difficult side of things and mostly great against bosses. As for PvP, it's pretty much only used in small-scale content. The dagger pair is a weapon known for its insane single target damage. The special ability of the dagger pair is Slit Throat, which is a single target ability that does damage based on the Assassin Spirit charges on you or the Sunder Armor charges on your enemy. Based on the amount of these stacks, you also apply bleed on your enemy over the next seconds. As you hit Slit Throat, your target also gets a debuff to healing received, which makes this weapon a very powerful option to assassinate a single target. This makes the dagger pair a very good pick for small-scale PvP, however, it's not really popular for any type of PvE content. The gloves are mainly known for their ganking potential. The special ability of this weapon is Disembowel, which is yet another single target ability. Once you use this ability on an enemy, they will be rooted in place, and as you channel, they will take a lot of damage whilst you interrupt their spellcasting and purge any shields they have active. The last hit of this channel also applies a bleed, which just makes this ability a very scary one to be caught by. This weapon is mainly used for ganking purposes, but can be played in small-scale PvP as well. And just like the dagger pair, this weapon isn't popular in any type of PvE content either. The Blackhands are a pretty unique type of weapon that have a big presence in certain content. The special ability is Devastating Strike, which is a 2-punch combo that takes place during a short channel. The first punch deals damage and stuns your target, whilst purging any buffs they have active. And the second punch deals even more damage and knocks your target back. This makes this weapon an ideal counter for a lot of builds, since many of them rely on buffs. The Blackhands are mostly used in small-scale PvP and aren't really used in PvE at all, since once again we're looking at a single target ability, but also one that is clearly catered towards PvP. The Dad Givers are very complex and mechanical, and if you don't know what they are capable of, you will get deleted by them without knowing what hit you. The special ability of the Dad Givers is Ghost Strike, and when you use it, you charge through an enemy whilst dealing a fair amount of damage and becoming invisible. If your target has 3 Sunder Armor charges, or if you have 3 Assassin Spirit charges, you consume these, and in return, the Ghost Strike ability won't go on cooldown. This makes it possible to use this ability back to back and do a lot of damage in a very short window. The builds for the Dad Givers are often very specialized to make a one-shot combo possible. If you decide to play the Dad Givers, it will take some time and practice to get used to them, but once you know how to use them, you will be a very strong foe in small-scale PvP. Since it is a single target ability, however, it once again is not a popular pick for PvE content. If you take the Deadly Swipe on your Q and Chain Slash on your W, you have plenty of damage and AoE to clear any solo PvE content with any of the daggers. Add Deep Cuts to that for some extra single target damage and you're set up to clear anything with ease. These are also the abilities you will most likely use in PvP content. Whenever you find yourself in a situation that requires a more specialized approach, only then you want to consider any of the other abilities. This will require some time and experience for you to figure out, so if you don't know what to do, just stick to the default suggestion. And until you have Chain Slash unlocked, you can simply use Throwing Blades. I hope you are happy with the information provided and feel more confident as a dagger player already. If this video brought you any form of value, make sure to give this video a like. Enjoy the swift and bursty gameplay, and I'll see you next time.